Yeah, I know.
Krista, are you rolling?
Yep, rolling.
Okay. All right, roll call. Chair Gary Delvo. Vice Chair Meg Schuler, Jim Gilbrick. Here. Debbie Dean. Here. Kathy Hinkes.
Here.
And Melanie Furness.
Approval of the agenda, please.
Move to approve.
Alder Dorf and Jim, all those here, so saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. The minutes from September 10th. Jim
Second.
and Kathy, all those here, so saying aye.
Aye.
Very good, thank you. Regular business, number 1. Consideration of possible action to report as a real estate subcommittee meeting, October 1st. This is the request for proposal to redevelop in the parking lot located on the 200 block of North Monroe Avenue. Kathy and I both attended. Matt chaired the committee, but unfortunately she's not here. So Kathy, you please give us a summary, please?
Well, we had two awesome proposals, two very, very different proposals, and it's not often that the city of Green Bay has a full block available. So there was one from T-Wall, which was 33 townhomes, 0 lot line, and it would actually, the buyer would be purchasing the property, so it's not condos. He was very, very clear on that. It's a $12 million investment. The second one was a combination of housing, both low income and regular, so it's 56 market, 24 affordable, along with a 24,000 foot grocery store. A grocery store that has established itself first in Madison and in some of the bigger cities. And that is a big need for our community. So in total, there were 56 market apartments, 24 affordable. It's a $24 million investment. It is contingent on $10 million of tax credits from WIDA. But at the end, Gary, you can add, but we recommended that we go with the Gorman Company.
Absolutely. It was
And
unanimous.
it's actually reversed, it's 56 affordable.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that.
And 24 market rate.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Okay.
It's reversed, it's
Sorry.
more affordable, yeah.
Yes, the subcom-
56 market, 24 affordable?
Yeah,
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
The subcommittee voted unanimously. It's extremely exciting project. But I think I see we have a lot of the people that are involved with that project, and I think we should hear that highlight again. So, motion to open the meeting, please.
Motion to open floor?
Alder Dorf,
Second.
seconded by Kathy. All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The meeting is open. Kevin, you want to say something first? Or not?
Sure. I think Chris summed it up really well. When we talked about this property and acquisition of the lot back in December of last year, it was really clear, like opportunities like this, a whole city block do not come up very often, and so for us to be able to work with and really shape the development on a main corridor, through our downtown, but really through our city, was really important for us. And I think, we've really been pleased with the results that we got in terms of the proposals that were submitted. I don't think you could add two different proposals, but, two great developers, two very viable proposals. But I also think, through some thorough discussion, the proposal in front of you really checks a lot of the boxes in terms of what, we as a city are looking for. One of those being that grocery store component. We've been talking about it for several years. I know how many leads has Jeff chased down, trying to work to get that piece. But as we grow our residents here in the downtown, I think they're looking for those services, like a grocery store here on the east side. The mix of housing units, the affordable housing units, the market rate housing units, the different types of products, the apartments, the townhomes, potential conversion to ownership in the future, I think really fits in where we're trying to go and diversifying our housing products that we offer here, and then really moves the needle in terms of continuing that residential side of development. So with that, we're extremely excited about this and appreciate the Redevelopment Authority's support. I think, you mentioned, I think we should hear from some participants in the audience, then we can discuss probably about next steps and how we want to move forward with this
Absolutely.
proposal.
So, the development team willing to make a summary update, please?
Sure,
So that the
great.
entire group can ask questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And they have the grocery
Do you want your color?
woman.
So,
Yes, that's Christie.
oops, sorry about that. My name's Ted Manica. I'm the Wisconsin Market President of Gorman and Company. Our team consists of Noel Halverson here at NeighborWorks. NeighborWorks will really provide our kind of a community engagement liaison, both for the grocery store. Christy Maurer here is the head of Maurer Markets, who will be our grocer. And she can talk about her experience and everything, but wanted to kind of introduce Noel, who everybody knows, but in terms of his role in the project, Noel and I have been kind of talking about getting together and partnering for a couple of years now on a project in Green Bay. And we thought that this was just an absolute great opportunity. When we saw this entire city block, as Kevin indicated, available, I think Christy and I came up here and we were looking at Monroe Avenue toward Quincy, and we were like, go, hello? I mean, it was like this huge expanse of land, and we were like, this is like phenomenal, which she loves because the grocer will need parking, and then if we can do a apartment building, which we are going to put an application in to WIDA, and that's what we proposed here. I think that's one avenue though, because I mean, we're real excited about this, and if the WIDA thing doesn't flow through, I think we go right to market rate somehow, some way. And you know, Debbie, we've been talking a little bit about the opportunities of market rate housing at this location, which I think is great because it kind of has a bookend of downtown and can provide a good buffer and transition into the neighborhood in the back. So let me give you a little PowerPoint here real quick. We're Gorman and Company, so we were founded in 1984. I should have put another bullet here that we've been trying to do a deal in Green Bay for about 10 years and finally have the opportunity. We're all over Wisconsin, La Crosse, Wausau, Green Bay, Madison, and Milwaukee. One thing that we do, which we pride ourselves on, is we design everything, and we build everything ourselves, and we manage everything ourselves. So as I indicated to the subcommittee last time, we get a lot of compliments, but we also get the criticism as well, and we can deal with that in an integrated fashion, which we think is a real advantage. What we're proposing here on the housing side is 80 units of housing, 56 affordable, just so we're all clear on that, as opposed to, and 24 market rate. The townhomes, there was some confusion about how NeighborWorks was in the townhomes. The townhomes would not be for home ownership immediately. WIDA has a program where you can have a townhome be for sale after the 15-year credit period. But for 15 years, it will be rental. With 24 market rates, 56 affordable. You can't like say these are market rate and these are affordable, they're all mixed together because of fair housing, so there's no segregated fashion there. The apartments and townhomes on Quincy Street we thought was a good buffer and transition to the neighborhood on Quincy, and we'll have 70 underground parking stalls that we can fit under the building. We'll try to expand that. Right now, the most efficient parking that you can ever build is underneath your footprint. When you start going extended beyond that, it's called plaza, decking, waterproofing, and it's a nightmare, both for construction and for maintenance. So what we're saying is we can fit 70 around here, but if we expand the building, which you possibly could do, we could expand the underground parking. But that does feed into this grocery store, which will be 24,000 square feet in Monroe. I'll let Christy talk a little bit about that. Operated by Mauer's Market, and the surface parking, which I think we have 85 spots that are identified there, would also piggyback onto the residential. So we would have 70 underground, and then they would use those at night for double parking. Because the last thing you want is a city block full of parking. So we want to make sure that we use that in two fashions, night and day. But Christy, do you want to come up and just talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd love to. Christy Maurer with Mauer's Market and then Mauer's Urban Market. We have 3 stores, one in Janesville, another one in Wisconsin Dells, and then our newest one is in Milwaukee. It's right downtown. It's also our smallest footprint. It's about 9,000 square feet. And that's right on the Northwestern Mutual campus. So I know we're excited to be part of this project. It's my dad and I who own our businesses and actively involved. And really for us, what we do is, and there's a lot of grocers out there who have to really follow a format. They have to have so many square feet. We really like to look at the project and get a sense of the neighborhood and the community and really design that store based on what we think is right for the neighborhood and what the right format is, right the size, and really get a play on what the neighborhood and the surrounding environment is kind of calling for. You'll notice in all of our stores, they all have a different vibe because Wisconsin Dells is different than Janesville, which is different than Milwaukee. And we really try to take that into consideration when we're building stores.
And Chrissy, I think the one great thing that you said to me was the engagement with the neighborhood beforehand, which would be maybe in partnership with NeighborWorks in terms of.
Yep. We typically are going to obviously engage the neighborhood ahead of time, whether that's in surveys, getting feedback, putting things on a website to know what, not only from a product standpoint, there are people who want certain products in their grocery store or are looking for organic or not organic or the cheapest or the most expensive. We try to have that right mix, but also in terms of layout, what people are looking for. Are they looking for a place to sit? Are they looking for a good shopping experience? All of those type of things will factor into when we're designing the interior of the grocery store.
Great, thank you. Joel, do you want to say?
Sure, just, as Ted mentioned, looking at it, community engagement, supportive services to the modest income households that would be occupying that project and exploring other roles that we might play. I'd also like to talk to Christy about the prospect of perch and small green sales from a little farmery project into a farm. So, but we'll explore some of those things as we go forward here. Obviously, lots of pre-development work ahead of everybody. So, but just excited to be on the team. I met Ted a few years ago, and we've been named in another proposal you submitted at one point a couple of years back, and I know we've been trying to find something that might work between our organizations, and hopefully this is the one.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So, let's see here, our total development cost would be $24 million. We have an annual tax increment because we have a TIF ask of $800,000 that would be targeted toward the grocer. Mixed-use development, that would be housing, puts people downtown. The grocer, as I indicated, will conform to the community needs through that engagement process, and then turn the baking parking lot into a high-density mixed-use development. This is kind of our sources and uses. We've got the residential sources and uses. Once again, we're going for a WIDA application here, and these are the sources and uses for that. If you want any more, information on that, I can explain it further. Here is the for the grocer, the sources and uses, and we're talking about a $5.6 million grocery store, and we are in a new market tax credit qualified tract. We're a food desert there, so we're very confident about that. I've talked to about 2 or 3 people on that and confident about that allocation. This is where the TIF comes in, and just so you know, from a WIDA perspective, on the housing side, those WIDA tax credits everybody talks about, everybody's eyes glazes over because it's so complicated, like what are those? Well, what happens is WIDA gives us the money, the $10 million in tax credits. So they'll say, hey, here's your subsidy for your housing. So Section 8 rents, what happens with Section 8 housing is the government pays your rent, okay?
Right.
Here, WIDA gives us like a stock certificate almost, saying, here are your tax credits. Go out and sell them. So we'll go out and sell them to literally Associated Bank, who will buy this deal, I'll tell you right now. And they'll buy those for $1. It's really 90 cents on the dollar, but just for ease of math. And that, as you can see, what that does is that subsidizes the cost of construction. So everyone gets a beautiful market rate type apartment, but they pay less because my debt's less because the tax credits subsidize the construction costs. You understand that? Same thing here with the grocer. So what we're trying to do here is take the TIF, the new market tax credits, and the private equity. What we do is we just try to subsidize the construction cost of the grocer, so she only has to pay what her business model says she will be sustainably successful at, which is $10 a square foot for a grocer. And if she can make that rent, and we can give her that rent, she thinks she can be very successful. So that's the goal, and that's why we're kind of having these layers of financing that help subsidize the cost of construction to get the rent both for the residential and for the commercial grocer where it needs to be successful. Any questions on that? It's kind of complicated, but I thought I'd go over that. Well, we have also Noel here, so we didn't put him on that. That was a mistake. Sorry about that. And then here's, these are a picture of her 9,000 square feet, beautiful market. I mean, it's unbelievable. That's actually how we did it, was I went into this and I'm like, who did this? And I went to it's very impressive. And that's downtown Milwaukee. And then Christy talked about it. Then we're, again, architect, contractor, and property manager, and we will engage the community for all of the mixed-use development in a community meeting when, if, we get all of the approvals necessary. Here's the site plan real quick. So this is Monroe here, just to give you a little sense of, this is Pine Street and this is Quincy. So here are the townhomes here. The 70-unit apartment building will go over the grocer and face Monroe, so you'll have that hard urban edge. And then the townhomes will kind of step it down back and try to kind of shield this parking as much as possible from the downtown and from the streetscape, so it can kind of be We may modify this a little bit just to make it a little more efficient. Right here, we're moving the alley, which I know Kevin had a little bit of indigestion there when we did that. And we'd like not to, because we don't really know what's in there right now. If there's something major in there, we may change that plan. We don't know what utilities are in there right now. Here's a close-up look of the underground parking as well, the way it's fit around the grocer. And we'd like to expand that a little bit, and I'm trying to look at design ways to do that. And then here's the blocking, massing diagram, which we just did real quick. Townhomes on Quincy, grocer on off of Pine and Monroe. And then Monroe is right here where we have the grocer, or the apartment building, sorry. And then here's our real quick timeline. Today would be the RDA approval if that happes. And then we would finalize the development agreement. We would then go into WIDA for December 6th application. What allows us to do that is that our plan conforms to the current zoning on the site, which is phenomenal, never happens, that's great. And then hopefully in April, we will get a WIDA announcement. If we don't, I said I think there is a very close Plan B that we can follow, which we will be working on while this application is pending for market rate. Sure. And so we're bullish on both of those plans. And then usually takes, once you get your design, about a year after April to kind of close it and start construction. So that's kind of where the process timeline is. And that's it. Any questions?
Wait. We'll open up real quick. But Kevin, one of the questions we had last Tuesday was the alley and what was underneath there, and you were going to do a little more research on it.
Correct. So we did some internal work through Public Works, looking at those utilities that went through there, also water department. So far, nothing large. Most of it is just site-specific and really could be moved fairly efficiently. We're kind of doing a second round now with some of our external partners, so like WPS, all the telecom companies, to see if there's anything in there. I know there's some telephone poles in there, but so far, nothing
no major sewer line or anything.
No.
Okay.
Right.
Good.
It's not the 84-inch line that's running down to
Right.
Metro, so.
Tell us a little more about the TIF assistance, which TIF it is pay as you go? Or?
Sure. So I think that's one of the things, and then we can talk openly or in closed session about negotiating things. I think just openly, we've talked with Mr. Mackham about how that TIF could be structured. I think, in the initial request, it would be potentially for upfront. We would look at then, also rolling in the cost of the land, the acquisition of the land, 1.2 million. But I think with that, depending on the amount of credits received from WIDA, and maybe some other funding sources, that the developer would be flexible in terms of working on how that TIF was exactly to be structured. I think depending on timing for when this were to move forward, we have a few options. One, we could create a new tax increment district, or secondly, we could expand one of our existing ones, 13, or more likely 20, which is Whitney Park, which was just created last year, so there's still a lot of life left in it in order
Sure,
of making
sure.
that payback.
And your tax increment will be different based on a WIDA residential deal versus a market rate. So if we had a market rate deal, we may ask a little more for that, just to subsidize that a little bit in terms of where the rents would be versus construction today. I mean, as Terrence said last time, which is very true, he said he's building the same building he's building today 24 months ago, and it was a 33% increase, if you remember that statement.
Yes.
That's real. We think it's kind of bottom or topped out, but, we don't know yet because it hasn't been this year. So that increment could play in how we do this
So,
too.
all the way around, from our perspective, the WIDA tax rate is very, very, very important.
Yeah, I think in terms of the project as presented today,
Yes.
the tax credit is critical to helping that move forward. I think with that, as Mr. Meckerman said, if that doesn't come through, I think they want to look at some other options because it's a great development site, and then we would come back here and discuss what those options might be.
Questions from the committee? Jim?
I have a question about, just conceptually, how might the project change if you don't get the WIDA tax credits?
I would have to look at the market study because I just actually ordered it for my WIDA application, which will have a market rate market rate dynamic about it as well. So I will look at like the demand side. One thing that we've found is very effective is the unit mix. One thing that is really killing families who want to work downtown, live and play downtown, is there's no 3 bedrooms, okay? So a lot of it's very interesting, a lot of financial issues have been solved or mitigated by changing your unit mix from a 1-2 to a 2-3. And now you need more parking, but we have the parking. So if I can share parking with her on the surface and solve that issue with a full city block, which we're pretty stupid if we can't, then I think we can kind of change that unit mix, change the dynamic. So that's probably where it would, we might lessen our units a little bit and enlarge them and get families down here, which she would love for a grocery store, and I think downtown would love it, just to get put people in the seats, So that's probably where it would change.
Barb, any questions, please?
Yes. Because of questions that I have heard, so I'm going to repeat some of those questions. So one of which was the city paid $1.2 million for the property.
Yep.
And so we're being asked to donate that. Tell me why that's a good fiscal decision to do that.
Sure. So how we would structure this, and the real estate subcommittee did go in and run a little bit of some financial scenarios in terms of projections of where this project may assess out at. I think Mr. Mackham was pretty on with, look, it's a $24 million project, but by the time, you assess it based on the net operating income, it's lower rent, so it may assess lower than, a market rate project. With that, it's going to generate substantial increment, probably 160,000, probably a little bit more, which would be enough to pay the debt service on that 1.2 purchase. And so what we would look at is, in some cases, where we may have like a project grant going in up front to help with the project. And in this case, we would look at the subsidy, or in terms of selling the land for $1 instead of selling it at cost as part of that project grant. With that, we believe that the income that would be generated from the new project would be sufficient enough to pay the debt service on the $1.2 million and to pay the $800,000 incentive. So there would be sufficient increment there, and also some that could still go back into the TID for other future improvements.
So saying this in layman's terms.
So
For the public.
correct. Yep. So I bought a piece of land.
Okay.
And I paid a certain amount of that land, and I had to take out a loan to pay back what I paid for that land. We're going to have a new project come in, and it's going to bring in a source of income in terms of incremental property taxes, that's going to be more than enough to pay my debt service on that.
Okay. So it's like you took out a mortgage for a rental property, and then the rents coming in pay more than enough for the mortgage, kind of like that.
Right, and in this case, I mean, what we don't get the rents, but we get the
Right.
property tax assessment
Right.
on it.
I know you
Yep,
don't get
and,
rents.
but now there's rents coming in, we have a revenue source coming in,
Okay.
and there is a substantial amount, there's enough to more than cover that debt service, and there's enough, we believe, even depending how it's structured, to cover any TIF incentive.
Which
and
would be
still
the
have some remainder.
800,000,
Correct.
that's the TIF incentive. And then how many years, is that like a 20-year TIF or?
So it, when Whitney Park was created, which is the one we'd probably look at, that's a 27-year rehab conservation tax increment. Just running the numbers that we had, we believe there would be more than enough time to pay that back. So if this project got its tax credits, then got under construction later next year, sometime get your CO in 2022, which means fully online 1/1 of '23. That TID goes until 2045, so there's still enough time to get income from that to pay that back.
If you make it real simple, it's like we're asking for 1.2 million, which is the land, plus $800,000, which is 2 million. And then how many years does it, divide that by 160,000, which is I'm creating every year? And that's how many years it's gonna be to take it back. I don't know if you got that math right off the top of your head, but that's what it
Absolutely.
is. It's probably
All right.
15, right? I mean,
Oh,
just
yes.
based on- Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. That was my question.
Sure, and I think maybe just in terms of, some numbers without having a full assessment on the project, because we don't know exactly what it's going to be yet. This project could potentially range, and depending on, the time that the townhomes are built or leased up, somewhere between, at the low end, maybe 7, and at the high end, 10. Probably somewhere in between, but based on those numbers, we feel that's more than sufficient to back that. Then if you also look at, in terms of the money that's contributed to as part of a project, we never want to be like the primary financier. Those numbers compare with past deals that we've done in terms of our percentage of equity into the project.
And the other person, or the other property owners or whatever, they wanted 100% TIF. That would have been far more.
Well, it would have been depending on where ultimately those got sold. One of the pieces with that is those those housing units, because they were residential units for sale, they would have been assessed for what they sold for. So if we could estimate what they would have sold for, and then I think, Mr. Wall was talking about, somewhere between 350 and maybe 600 at the top end. Ultimately, though, it would depend on what was the actual sales price. That's the price that would go in our book in terms of what it was assessed for. So there might be a little variability in terms of where those came in. With that, though, his request was for all the increment that they generated. I think we probably would have negotiated that, moving forward, and come back with some type of deal. I think in this same case here, I think what the developer is looking for is a commitment from the city to provide some site control, that they can show to WIDA that, look, this is theirs. They have, whether it's a option to purchase or a planning option, or we have a term sheet that they control the site. And with that, after they're awarded tax credits, we would come back then and work on a development agreement that would kind of spell out specifically those details. They know how many, the value of those tax credits. They'd be able to, spend some more resources on refining the plan and the product of exactly what they're going to build, and then our assessor could get a better handle on, okay, how much increment is this going to generate, and we could run those numbers to make sure we have a good deal for both parties.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Wendy, I
Since
know.
I'm sorry, since the meeting is open, if there's some questions from the audience. Yes, please.
John Vanderleest, I represent District 11. I support the project you got going here, but my thoughts are that the 1.2 million that we're giving up front, I feel that the developer could handle that cost. City of Green Bay is not that strong financially. $1 million means a lot to the City of Green Bay. I know we got the proposal, brought in front of us here, but I feel that, we're giving an awful lot of money up front the city doesn't have. In other words, our budget and our budget as far as, we're probably looking at a tax increase this year, an additional tax increase right across the board. We've had it for the last couple of years. I think, we're sending the wrong message as far as, I think we have to work with developers, but I don't think we have to, this is a nice piece of property. You look at the property that's up front there on Monroe. I feel that, the developer should buy the property and then move forward. And I think the city's willing to work with them on the TIF part of it and help them in that way. But I feel that the $1 million that we're handing, $1.2 million is a lot of money. The taxpayers are paying these bills. And I feel that, we should look at it, maybe another little bit of more input as far as how the developer could pay the upfront money, so we wouldn't have to get into the banking part of it for long term. And that would be my thoughts, just that, I've talked to different people in my district, and they feel that, where are we getting the money from? I mean, it's coming from every citizen, every taxpayer. There's 33,000, I think there's 33,000 different, private and tax bills that go out, and everybody's part of that. And I feel that the banking business for the local government is, I think, really up to the private sector. So we shouldn't be in the banking business.
Thank you. Randy, please.
Yeah, I disagree. I definitely want to support subsidized housing, and I think...
I support the project.
Well, I understand, but we're not going to get subsidized housing if we're charging them $1 million for the property. Our taxpayers are not paying for it. They're going to generate enough so that they're paying our debt service, so that's not coming off our tax rolls. Not one citizen is putting a dime into this. They're generating the money that will pay off the debt, so this is not going to affect any of our taxpayers at all. It will help bring in affordable housing, which is, I hope we can all get behind that as much as we can to help we just see the light that this needs to happen for the city. So all we can do to help that happen, and I think by giving them the land and then making the deal where they're generating the money that pays off the debt. We're not paying anything. They're paying it. So, and we're getting subsidized housing in a grocery store. It's a great development. I'm all for making this deal.
Jeff, I know several years ago we did the listening session with people downtown. Can you give us a recap of that?
Sure. I think it's well documented over the past decade that as downtown advanced, the #1 sought after component for downtown to really roll was a grocery store. No disservice to any of the neighborhood grocery stores that already exist,
Right.
and the one in the Broadway district. But what Mowers Market is proposing for this site, it's right on. It is right on. A lot of my chatter with business and residents and business leaders, they're just so impressed by what you've come forward with. Also, your explanation to us of the project was very detailed, and that was really helpful. In the immediate neighborhood, just to remind everyone, there are 50 residential units under construction today. When you take a look at 901 Main, Whitney School, ground was just broken on a half a dozen townhomes around Whitney School. So about 50 units under construction right now. The 500 residential units that are on our riverfront are 100% occupied. It's great that Mr. Miller is here today and has another site that he wants to talk about. So this is what we want more of. With 250,000 people living in Brown County, if 2 or 3 or 4% of our county population wants to be urbanites, we need this development, and the next one, and the next one. What I love about this, it's affordable, and it is townhomes. It's a variety of housing, but it's market rate and affordable housing. Right on.
Mr. Mayor, I'd love to hear your opinion, please.
Yes, thank you. So as Kathy said, we were really blessed with 2 high-quality proposals. The one that we have in front of us today really checks all the boxes in terms of what people have been looking for in downtown Green Bay with the high-quality grocery store, the affordable housing, and just added density, as Jeff said, appropriate but necessary density to build a successful downtown. So I'm really excited about the proposal. and looking forward to negotiating things as they move forward. I just had a quick question about timeline. You know, understanding that currently it's dependent on WIDA tax credits. If the project were to shift, would you be able to stick to the timeline? Because it seems fairly conservative as it's sketched out right now.
Yeah, usually, because of that 2 to 3 bedroom thing I was talking about versus the 1 and 2, I wouldn't really begin to design it until I knew which direction I was going, and I wouldn't know until WIDA comes out on April 1 with their announcement. So then I would start designing then, and it takes 6 months to design, and, you know, we'd be in the ground probably by the end of the year.
Right.
So I think that's, you know, I just don't see how I can get out of that.
Yep.
You know, I think April 1st is a big date in terms of which direction we go.
Right. So if you're unsuccessful with the WIDA tax credits, though, you feel as though you'd be able to,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Because until, from now, in a sense, until April 1, I will be working on a market rate scenario if the WIDA deal doesn't happen. So I will have my financing kind of all set, but I gotta design it. It takes 6 to, 8 months to design it.
Okay.
So either way.
Very good, thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Brian, please?
Yeah, Ted, thanks for the presentation. Maybe just a couple of questions, and a couple for you, Kevin, as well. So, essentially coming out of today, are we looking for a planning option?
I think the recommendation from the RDA should be to come up with to draft either a planning option or a term sheet to come back. I think what Mr. Mackham would like is going in, applications are due December 1st. 6. But from before that point is to be able to show WIDA that they have site control.
Okay.
So whatever mechanism does that from the city.
Okay, and Ted, if we're not approved for the WIDA tax credits, would you anticipate requesting a new planning option from the city to evaluate the market rate?
I'd have to come back and say, okay, we didn't get it, and either give me more time because we think it's a WIDA deal, or give me more time because it's a market rate deal, and kind of sell the new concept.
Okay, and then I also did have a question that the mayor alluded to regarding timeline. So when we're looking at, I think ultimately maybe one concern that I would have is the city tying up a property for a couple of years here. And just wanting to make sure, obviously, that we're building increment as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're looking at due diligence, Kevin, I'm looking at you. Have we conducted a phase 1 on that site already? Are we responsible for doing the environmental?
So we have not discussed that yet. I mean, I know we have some funds available to work on it. We did I'll call it a pre-phase 1, which all in all, it's like any other downtown site, but we don't believe there's any super significant risks in terms of environmental challenges on the site.
And I thought the DNR had something logged on that site from like back in 2002, maybe?
At the southwest corner.
Okay.
There's a former service station.
Okay, so I mean, have standards changed much from 2002 to now, that in essence what I'm getting at is, in an effort to expedite the project, could we bypass the phase 1, go right to the phase 2, or do you think the phase 1 is still necessary?
Defer to you. I mean, it's kind of a necessary.
We'd be using EPA funds to do that assessment if we're using our funding.
Okay.
And you have to do the phase 1 to get to the phase 2 point.
Got
when
it.
you use those funds.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Sure.
Do you anticipate, Ted, doing any boring or geotechnical services, I guess, prior to that April deadline to ensure stability?
Probably
of that
not
site?
prior to, but right when we know which direction we're going. Like, another component could be expanding the parking a little bit, and where we're digging and actually doing a foundation, those would be different borings than I would if I knew it was gonna be a service parking lot versus townhomes, just because of the weight of what the structure will be. So once we finalize that whole site plan, then I will be doing geotech, which will probably be in conjunction with a phase 2.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Spots.
Okay, and then do you see, if you're approved for the tax credits, do you foresee, I understand you might be playing conservative here, but do you foresee the possibility of at least breaking ground by fall?
It would be by the end of the year, it'd be fourth quarter, for sure.
Okay.
Because I'd have to take 6 months to design it, and then I've got to close with my investor, who will do a plan and cost review and kind of, give me a colonoscopy on my whole plan. And so that'll be, 90 days. So I mean, if we do a fourth quarter close and around Thanksgiving, it's about where I'm thinking.
Okay, good. And then, And I do appreciate Alder Vanderleest's comments. I do think it's important, as the RDA is discussing this, that while we are in a difficult position financially with respect to our budget, I don't agree that we're in a difficult position with respect to how we are currently leveraging TIF. And in fact, we are significantly under what the state allows. And so this project, to me, isn't about trying to, I guess, remediate a shortfall that we have in the short term. It's about building a strong future for the taxpayer, when we do expire some of these TIDs. So I just encourage you to keep that in mind. I think there's a lot to be determined in the development agreement relative to the amount of the ask.
Yes.
Let's let that process work itself out, and then let Kevin and staff be able to come back with a proposal that shows actual numbers. I just want to make sure that we're not short-sighted to the extent that we make a deal-killing decision that doesn't even allow us to get to the discussion.
Good point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, please. No.
Just one comment that Alderman Johnson's remarks made me think of is, the other part of this too is our community as a whole, Brown County as a whole, is significantly deficient in, at all levels of the market, units to meet the demand and just net growth and household formation in the county. I mean, we're just behind 1,500 to 2,000 units just in terms of new family formation versus building permits issued. So I think in terms of just a general strategy for all the communities in this county, especially Green Bay, building housing right now is something that should just be a top priority regardless of the segment of the market we're trying to serve.
Anybody else? From a committee perspective, I don't think it's necessary, but if you want, we can go into closed session in more detail. We did that last Tuesday with Catherine. We're very, very comfortable with what we heard. But it's up to the group. If not, I entertain a motion to go back to regular order of business.
So move.
Second.
Jim and all the doors, all those in favor, someone saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. We're back to regular order of business. Let's make sure we get the right motion if we are going to do a motion.
Sure, so just quick few follow-ups. I do want to be clear, and I think we got to it, in terms of the money, 1.2 for the land. And in terms of what we would do is that, I do want to make it clear that this would be a tax increment expense. It is not a general levy expense. And so what we looked at, and that's part of what we did with this last plan, was putting it into TID 13, and in terms of how it helped the downtown, right, short-term parking, the long-term development. Depending on what TID it would land in, it would be a TID expense. I'm just talking with Diana. I think in terms of funding sources, I mean, we've talked about potentially state trust fund for doing this. We might look at some other options, but we'd basically look to do this as a TID expense. Just to answer Alder Vanderleest, this would not come back against in terms of our debt ceiling or our debt service for the general levy. I think that's really important in terms of, because we do have a tighter operating budget, and in terms of borrowing, we're trying to reduce that overall debt. So this would be a TID supported debt.
Kevin, to that point, how is the debt being paid for now?
We've been using, I think, cash balance to do some of it. Hope for Diana on that one. I just make the deals, Diana pays the bills.
It's just coming out of the fund balance for that TID.
For 13.
So does it have a tax levy impact now?
Right now, no.
Okay. It may have if we don't proceed with the development.
Correct. Correct. In terms of a long-term, right, I think our goal is to get the development on, to get the increment on,
Right.
to make.
My point exactly.
Correct. Which is a great segue, I think, in terms of a big reason why we support it. I mean, it's a super efficient piece of land. If you look at the land value right before we had it, and Associate had it a surface parking lot, looking at about $350,000 per acre, which is okay. But, after this, with the multifamily, we're going to be somewhere in $3.5 to $4 million per acre of development. It's significant. And so I think when we talk about, as Alder Johnson had talked about, using the instrument that we have for development, tax increment financing, to get that development in place so that when that TID is over, the city is in a better place financially in terms of helping out the levy and getting these projects then that are going to help levy supported expenses. And then just the last point, I think it's really important, and I think Mr. Mackin brought up, the importance of quality, affordable units. We're lucky in the sense that our rents are generally pretty low, but that doesn't always equate to a great housing product. And just because, you're on a fixed income or have, don't have the means for housing doesn't mean you have to live, in a substandard unit. And so I think it's really important that we have these programs like the tax credits to help fill that gap that provides a great product into the market. And so having that, bringing that grocery component in, it's not just a grocery store on the east side of downtown, but really in this, USDA-defined, food desert in terms of looking for options. This is really a great win for the city. So with that, I think, I would recommend at this point to have staff negotiate or draft up a planning option and/or term sheet. And we can discuss what Peter's going to do and then come with the developer. And that will come back then at the next meeting, the official document in terms of how long or just what piece. I guess the terms to be determined and voted on at the next meeting, but I think at least to give us direction to draft and come up with that document, that we can come back and then figure out and talk what works best for WIDA in terms of what's going to be the strongest in terms of supporting the application.
I'll second it.
I'll make a motion that staff does move forward, negotiating and drafting plans with Morgan and Company related to the site. And I do think it's, again, important to reiterate, it's being paid for by tip money and not tax dollars. So.
James, second?
Second it.
Questions or comments? If not, we shall vote.
Passed unanimously with one abstention.
Okay. Okay. Very understandable. Excellent job, everybody. You guys great work and full speed ahead.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Great. Number 2, consideration of possible action on development agreement 19-03 with Miller Land Investments LLC for 1 Astor Park, 100 East Mason Street, 120 East Mason Street, and Washington Street. Tax parcel 15-168-8, 15-2, and 15-168. Great. Kevin, did you again, I imagine?
You have an old-fashioned easel by any chance? I am old enough where I don't completely trust technology because every time I want my email, it doesn't come there. Even today, we tried, and we don't have the right adapter, but hopefully we got something coming up.
Yep.
All right.
Excellent.
So this project, we talked about maybe a year or so ago. We talked about the RDA owns a little strip of land where the trail is down south of Mason Street. We talked about potential if a project came forward with the Redevelopment Authority being the part with that strip of land. Really what that was located on was a discussion of development of the adjacent site. So this here basically shows the environment. So we're talking about this area, 120 East Mason Street. Again, Leslie didn't release Mason. So this is right on the waterfront, just south of Mason, right off Adams Street, right across from the water utility. And we have been working with the developer, Miller Land Investments, Dean Miller, this team is here today, to talk about a multifamily development project at this site. This project involves 2 phases. The first phase is really a site preparation phase to demolish the existing structure, to check grades, and really get the site ready for development. And part of that would involve relocating the trail. The trail currently runs parallel to Adams. This would move the trail back up parallel to the river, which would be great in terms of making a smoother connection to the trail north of Mason Street. Much forward one slide, we can show a little bit where the relocated trail would be in there. And then the phase 2 would involve the construction of a 4-story residential structure with approximately 100 market rate units. Again, we really believe this fits in with a lot of our priorities at the city and what we're trying to do in terms of safety, productivity, accessibility, innovation. You're looking at remediating a brownfield site, expanding public infrastructure, our transportation infrastructure here. Again, significantly higher per acre value than what exists there right now. And really, again, adding additional housing products into our market. Noel is spot on in terms of there is a supply problem of housing in the city. Cheryl and I and some others were at a Housing and Economic Conference in Madison on Friday, and I think their number was we're about 1,700 units below where we should be for the county in terms of housing units produced. Across the gamut. So, I mean, the demand is there, and the market studies will continue to show, both for affordable and market rate, there is a need for that. So with that, the property right now assesses about $568,000. We anticipate roughly that this new project will come in somewhere around $13 million. And with that, we are potentially asking, or would ask, the Joint Review Board to create a new tax increment district. Currently, it's in TID 5, which is one of the oldest TIDs, and then running up, I think 2030, numbers again, 2026. I mean, it's getting right towards the end. So we potentially look at a new TID, maybe including this parcel, Royal Cleaners, our property on Chicago and Monroe, kind of that, kind of Mason Street stretch through there upon completion of phase 1. So with that, our recommendation in terms of a TIP incentive would be a project grant of $150,000 that would be used for relocating the trail. And then if phase 2 moves forward with the apartment project, an 80% pay-go with a cap of $4 million. And once again, this would be a TIF-supported project. There would be no levy dollars involved here.
Pay-go.
Pay-go.
Yeah, pay-go. Good.
Pay-go.
Yeah.
And so with that, the developer, his team is here. We can talk a little bit more about the project if you'd like to open the floor.
Motion to open for
So moved.
Jim?
Second.
Alder, I'm sorry. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is open. Chief, present.
It's a wonderful project, but never follow an excellent presentation. The gentleman did an excellent presentation. I'm a little more old-fashioned for as developers go. I generally pick, and exclusively pick, projects I like. There'll be view properties, riverfront properties, so I'll pick something that's not serving its full capacity. This is what I found. Right there along the river, I bike, hike, spent most of my life here in De Pere, grew up in Manitowoc. And we had an opportunity to buy it. We bought it 2 years ago. We did our phase 1 surveys on it to make sure we weren't inheriting anything too bad. It isn't. It's a very clean site. We have a few petrochemicals, very low level, which just means everything, all the dirt needs to stay on site. It's a clean site, so that's what we proceeded. We said, what can we do with it? And we started talking to the city and working hard along with the city. We were going to tear down this building, but that's what needs to be done. If you could go back to the previous one. The other one's great. Go ahead and do the aerial view. This is all the old railroad here, okay? And when the railroad had their building station right here, and if you can't really see it here, but this is all underwater. This is actually maybe a foot or two underneath the river at this point. So what we're talking about is filling in for a first phase the land here. Building will be torn down, the land will be filled in, new path connecting from here to there. That'll allow us then to divert trail traffic and to build up a portion of land. The land is in a floodplain. We tried to design something, a building in the floodplain, but it was not successful. So what we need to do is we need to take that land, or at least the portions of the building pad, out of the floodplain. So what we're proposing during phase one is the demolition of the building and the rerouting of path. In addition, we will be raising the land underneath the building foundation to approximately 104 feet. That'll allow us to use conventional construction methods. Basically, it's underwater most of the time now. We're fixing a kind of a known issue, and we just want to take care of it. We had a renter in there until recently, so that's why we're here now to go ahead forward. That's phase one. Phase two, like a lot of sites along the river, it's a silty clay, and it'll be reinforcement will be needed. I don't want to go too technical, but the foundation is expensive, and when we tear down all our foundation, our whole building, we've done our test holes, we've done our geology, everything else that we know what we have there, but you don't know until you tear everything out. We're going to find everything out underneath that property. That's why we're breaking up in two phases. We want to put the path in, take care of the flooding issues at the site, allow us to have free reign to the rest of the property, to raise it up, build it up. That'll take approximately a year. From start to completion, we want this to be ready for next year, December 1st, and then continue on. We need to take the building, we can't do this in one phase because of financing. The property would be in the floodplain, the banks, different HUD organizations do not want to talk to you if you're within the floodplains. It makes financing difficult, valuation of land and that kind of thing, much harder.
How big of a deal is it to get it out of the floodplain from our?
As a technical standpoint, it's not. What you need to do is you need to have the site cleared, the building down. You need to take the land to 104.5 feet. Right now, if you take a look at it, we have a wonderful ice wall that the Corps of Engineers put in many years ago. That's 102 feet. And right now, that'll keep the trail high and dry, so we have no problem with flooding of the trails. So another 2.5 feet. That can be taken down once it's put up for 6 months, but you need it. It's just so a lot of fill needs to go on this site. The trail itself, if I just read here quickly, 4,000 yards of fill, a lot of materials, just for the trail portion of it, not the site. The site will require another 7,000 to 10,000 yards. So it's one of those things you have to get it to that point, assess where you're at. We're very happy the city put in a clause to help reimburse some of the costs, put in a new trail. It was worthwhile for us to do it, so the costs go above. The costs go above. We pay the cost above. What we plan to do is control the property, divert the trail temporarily in the front, put the trail in, get the trail approved, and then resubmit the new trail to the city. It's a 50-foot wide trail run along the river at 102 feet, which will continue underneath the bridge there, which will be rocked and connect back to the existing new trail.
Do you have this picture in your PowerPoint?
Go one more slide.
One more slide. It looks like a lot of variety on the front, which that person like, versus all looking the same. So could you talk about that a little bit?
So I'm Jim LaPlante, I'm the architect of the project. Happy to be in Green Bay again. It took me forever. I've been in this community for 20 plus years as an architect, and until finally 3 years ago I finally landed a bunch of jobs now in your community. I've done the suburbs a lot. And here's another one that I'm going to be extraordinarily proud of. I can't say it any other way. But, bottom line, we played with the exterior multiple times. What we came down to is we chose the townhome look. And why did we choose the townhome look? Partly because we are starting with, on the first floor of the project, we have at-grade entries to the units. So that does multiple things. To start in the first place. But it also then starts helping us break down massing. We didn't want the big building. We played with this expanding large eaves, large cornices, but that really just never played well. It never finished the project for us. So we toned it down. And you're going to notice the masonry ends at the third floor as well. So again, once the fourth floor happens, it tones down. So the whole point of the design, or the exterior design, excuse me, was the townhome take the step down to not overscale, overmass this project or this site, and truly fit in as best as possible. I know our neighborhoods are a block or two away, honestly, but that's still who we're looking forward to.
Speaking of that, this project is actually located in the Astor Historical neighborhood. So I don't know if you took that into consideration with the design. This design looks totally different than that design.
It's not too totally different. It's a 2D, a little fuzzy compared to a 3D is about, that is a massing model now, so it's not as developed as this. But no, it's very, very similar is my best answer. And absolutely, we did think about it, because honestly, we really thought we were going to come in with a larger building. I mean, we've well, cornices larger. I mean, we really did go down that path, and we actually were there for much longer than we were recently. So
the 3D there is strictly to get you the scope and size. We put that next to the bridge. The details are on the drawings here. These are the ones that we've shown to the city and proposed.
Well, among the many hats that I wear in the community, one is that I'm on the board for the Astor Neighborhood Association. And normally, if there's a development going on, we reach out to a neighborhood association. My expectation is that you will be doing that.
Absolutely.
And engage the neighborhood somehow.
Yes, we talked about in terms of timing. I think one of the things is they wanted to look at getting some direction from RDA and the council, right? Are they supporting this? One of the pieces, with all development projects, and we should get one on the next agenda item, is already approval of conceptual plans, construction documents, basically, right, helping to shape the design. So you're required to come back to the RDA to go through some of those things. I think, as they mentioned, I think that's one of the things we definitely pushed for in terms of being in the historic district. You want to compliment, but you don't want to like try and pretend it's 100 years old.
Right, no.
So I think, their use of a lot of masonry and brick on here is really important
Yes.
for us. And I think, with that, with some confidence on getting approvals from the city, they'll be able to spend a little more in terms of resources, in terms of, all right, refining some of the renderings, moving from massing scale to actually doing design drawings. But then, yes, part of that process is reaching out to the neighborhood to kind of discuss what the ultimate product looks like. I think in this case here, and I'll just, aside for a minute, I think one of the things too with Astor is, we're talking about creating these lifelong neighborhoods. Astor doesn't have a lot of rental units right now. And so in terms of, right, getting into the...
At least non-vacant.
What's that?
At least non-vacant.
Correct. So, right, going back to that supply, so I think, some of the things that we've talked about is helping to add to that mix in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely believe it, but the one thing that I've learned, my father-in-law lives right on Monroe there. The Astor neighborhood is one of our oldest neighborhood associations. So we definitely want to make sure that the proposal goes in front of them and that they get some input. Because you know what, you're right, we have no rental there. And I think we can get that team, that neighborhood excited.
That was actually brought up and thought about, actually a member of our team brought up and said we should bring it out first, but then it came down to who wants to announce what first.
Right.
That's
and
okay.
we were
Good.
told to
It's
take
good
a
to know.
back place, so,
Right.
which is
You'll probably have a
understandable.
community room where we can hold events.
Exactly, you can hold
There you go.
Well, and in addition to, some of the development agreement pieces, there will be some things, when it comes to the land parcel, but also the zoning and future land use for the property, that there will be some actual public processes also through the plan commission, and we felt that was an appropriate time in terms of reaching out to the neighborhood to get involved in that process.
And this is.
Thank you.
It's gorgeous, and it's right in front of the water department.
Yeah.
It is,
So you're not
correct.
blocking any of the,
No. Right.
it's perfect.
Any other questions? Go motion of the regular order of business, please.
So moved. Second. Kathy.
Kathy, I'm good. All those in favor, say by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're back to regular order of business. So really, you sent us the development agreement.
Right.
And I had a chance to look at it. Anyway, bottom line, hope everybody had a chance to look at it. Some degree of detail, but I thought you recapped it well. Questions and comments in regard to the development agreement?
Gary, I had one.
Basically for
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were directing that towards the audience. Oh, wait.
Question or comment?
I said basically they're asking we would add a new TIF and $150,000 right now.
It would be $150,000.
Phase one.
To reimburse construction of the trail. And then upon moving forward with phase two, an 80% pay-go with a cap of $4 million.
Alder Johnson, did you have a comment? I'm sorry.
Oh, just to interject,
Yeah.
that was added, we were originally applying for different grants and different things to offset that original amount of the $150,000 that the Wisconsin Trail. I know we don't want to get too far in the weeds, I promised I wouldn't, but originally we were doing grants and things like that, so there are available grants for assistance with that.
Alder Johnson?
Yeah, Kevin, that, I think we had previously talked at this body maybe about a land swap. Will the city actually own the land underneath the trail?
Yes, so there's, and I forgot to put a parcel map up there. Do you want to put the image, the 3D aerial up? Yeah, oh, maybe do the site plan. So right now, RDA owns the strip of land where the trail is. And the city owns a chunk of land here. You can kind of see it in this dashed line right here. So we own the waterfront here and we own the trail here. Mr. Miller owns this parcel and goes up to the waterfront here. So the city does not have all waterfront access here. The goal would be is that we would do some trading of parcels so that we would cede this piece to the developer so the project could move up closer to the street, still have a sidewalk along Adams Street. And then the developer would give us a chunk here, so the city would own either as right-of-way or a parcel 50 feet from the bank all the way back to Cass Street. So that the city has the right-of-way all the way through 50 feet back. Kind of like we were doing at the shipyard or other parts. I know some other things on the East River. We really feel like 50 feet is the appropriate amount to have. That gives us enough room for trail, gives us enough room if there's flooding or just other issues. So we'll end up with 50 feet along the waterfront.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to confirm that we would have that.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept this.
That would be to approve the development agreement, 1903, Miller Land Investments, subject to minor legal technical clarifications.
To approve the development agreement with Miller.
Land Investments.
Land Investments, subject to some possible small changes.
The motion?
Second.
Second by Kathy. Motion second. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, please, Jim.
I just wanted to clarify in my own mind what the number of years might be for a payoff. I looked at the $4 million would be our max on table.
Correct.
Correct? And
So-
303,000 a year increment roughly is about a 13-year payback.
Just put up my spreadsheet. I have a little bit lower increment and a little longer, I've built 16 years.
Okay.
But, I mean,
still,
within that
how-
range,
The
right?
life of the district would be
27.
7 years.
Yeah.
So, good.
Mr. Mayor, Council,
Looks good.
full speed ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially just in terms of the phase one is concerned, I think there is a real public benefit what's being done here.
Absolutely.
Which is going to allow more public access directly to the water. And I know internally we've been talking about engaging with the property owner to the south of this property to, again, improve public access. So, yeah, I think it's a great project, good use of land.
And as a representative of the Green Bay Water Utility, I'd much rather that looking out our window than what's there.
I did talk with Director Corrick early on in the project, and I was like, I'd like to change the view out your window, and she was very excited about that.
And a lot of people access the trail there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
We have-
Cars.
I'm sorry, we have a motion and a second, so is there a question or comment? You shall vote.
So exciting.
All right. Yeah, I tell you what. I'll further in favor. So, as soon as you have with your report.
Passed unanimously.
Very good, thank you. Look.
Yep, thanks.
Pleasure project.
This will go to council.
Next to North Side, right next to the
Action on opposite.
Oh, okay.
Development agreement.
Yeah, I'll just shift back to 85. Okay.
There's a lot of people, right?
It's kind of nice, because, you know,
All right,
Small town means-
so we are looking at the Legacy Hotel. We went through and talked about it earlier this summer. Taking that old Red Barb Steakhouse, replacing it with a high-end, five-story boutique hotel. In short, the project is really still the same, it's just shifting on the property. So we have a representative of the developer here, if you want to go to the next slide. Initially, this project, the footprint was up towards the existing hotel, towards the north. This is shifting it south, which is to the left, so it'll be actually closer to the corner of Brett Favre and Dale. I'll go to the next slide. So this is, as you come in Brett Favre Pass, what you'll see. So again, the staying true to what we've talked about with the current renderings. It's still the same building, but look, it's a significant change in terms of where we're putting it on the parcel, and just felt it's appropriate to get approval from the RDA, which is responsible for changing all those things. I did put in the rest of the renderings, if you just want to take a quick look, right, around the building, how it's going to be structured. It definitely fits in with what we're trying to do over there, kind of that modern industrial look. And so we recommend that the RDA approve. I know kind of as a representative of developers here, if you have any particular questions.
So we haven't taken anything away, we just moved things around.
Literally sliding the building, right?
Repositioning the development on the site, it's really all that's been done.
Correct.
So I make a motion.
A motion by Kathy, second by Jim, to approve the new design. Any other questions or comments? If not, we shall vote again. I'm back on track,
It's not coming up. My screen is frozen.
So pretty.
You want to do You want to do a Okay.
Passed unanimously.
Excellent, thank you. Beautiful designs, I love it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Number 4.
Now it came up.
That all came up?
But now it won't let me go.
Number 4, consideration of possible action and recommendation from the Public Arts Commission for use of $27,000 of allocated CDBG funding for a beautification project.
Okay, so the RDA approved $50,000 originally for beautification, and with that, we did some bus shelter wraps, did some sidewalk poetry, and we allocated money for a sculptural piece in front of the farm.
Okay.
So we have some remaining funds. Suggestions went to the Public Arts Commission. The 4 things that went before them were like Green Bay, well, lit. We're gonna put Toronto Green Bay. We love it so much there. So we're looking at like Green Bay, either spelled out or GB.
Right.
Lit
Let
signs.
the tourists come. What would that be? Okay, okay.
Keep going, Chris. And then the other option two was a mural in the shipyard area. If you hit that again, you'll see that.
It's very,
Not that, but some
oriental.
type of a mural, right, down the shipyard. Next option is what's called an installation or a sculpture, something different.
I
there was
love
this
that.
red ball. Everybody loved the red ball, but, and then,
We need a green
that's
ball.
like in an alley,
That's
Peter
cool,
did
too.
some stuff, some work in alleys, which is cool. And then the other option was just to wrap our buses in
No.
art, so. Those are the four options they looked at, and the PAC recommended as their first. The first one they liked was some type of an art installation. Everybody loved the red ball type-ish type of thing. So number one was the art installation. Number two was the illuminated Green Bay or GD sign somewhere. 3 was a mural in the shipyard area, and then 4 were the bus artwork. So that's the recommendation from the PAC to you for the funding.
There's only enough for one.
It's only enough for one. So they're recommending that original sculpture or an art installation would be the first choice.
I think we like all the projects. I think it was
Yep.
just what's gonna, the block grant funding is gonna be used for. I think there's some good discussion, right? We'd love to do all of these things, but this
Yep.
first 27.
Right. Right, all 4 of them would work. I mean,
Sure,
we could do all
sure.
4 of them, but I think they were looking for some kind of an original sculpture installation.
And that installation is permanent.
It could be permanent, or it could be something that would move.
Okay.
That ball, for example,
Right.
moves.
Yeah,
That's a
okay,
piece
that's what I
that
thought.
moves
Right.
to
Yeah.
different cities, but, so.
So which potential location would, or you don't know?
You know, we haven't, these are just the concepts at this
Okay,
point.
right,
so they haven't
right,
looked at
right.
Okay, so they have that listed.
Tell us a little bit about the commission. How many folks are on that? I mean, I respect their opinion, so.
Matt, how many members do we have on the PAC?
Randy, how many members do you have?
We have 3 advisory,
Liaisons?
and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us?
That sounds right.
4 and a half.
The bottom line, I respect their opinions. I mean, you guys are into it, so I think we should override what you recommend. That's my opinion. But you guys do differently.
Yeah, I think we have to respect the people that we have on there and the recommendations that we make. So I'll move that we allocate it to the first recommendation.
Second.
Okay, motion by Kathy, second by Eleanor. Any questions or comments?
Passed unanimously.
Excellent, good luck, it's exciting. We'll get them, Randy.
And just before we move on from art, one more thing. I don't know if you noticed that both of the proposals for the Monroe site had the 1% for arts in there.
Yes,
Yes,
yes, yes,
yes,
it did.
definitely.
And we've talked with the developer in both cases. Yeah, we.
Correct.
Yes.
And just not going too off track, part of what the approvals will be then comes back when we approve like the concept plan, they'll identify what's going to be classified as book art.
Excellent.
Next, I love the Green Bay sign.
I saw it.
I think it will be a draw.
Number 5, consideration of possible action on commercial facade improvement grant funds to Urban Partnerships Community Development Corporation for enhancements to 815 Chicago Street, parcel 14-646.
That's me.
All right.
So we have an application before us from the Farmery. I think most of us around this table are pretty familiar with who the Farmery is. They are looking to get some funds to improve their facade. What they're proposing here would include the installation of new windows, doors, siding, and exterior lighting. Yeah, so that's the proposal right there. I'm sure you saw the last image, that's what it looks like generally, more or less today. Yes, it's a big improvement. So the Farmery has requested the RDA contribute $30,000 for the project. Our design review team did score their application. considering the amount of funds we have available for this year and the score, we are recommending $19,800 go to the farm rate for this project.
And it's coming out of the facade fund, right?
Yep, so every year we get, the past few years, we've been allocating $50,000, which is CDBG funds. So this would be the first, actually we have 2 applications today, the first of that $50,000.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
The applicant is here, by the way, if you do have any questions for them or.
Very good, keep going.
So, we'll be approving the 19,800.
That's the staff recommendation.
Wait, that was who used our motion, Jim?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so the motion is second. Any other questions or comments? We shall vote.
FYI, I can vote because I am no longer on the board.
So I'll just make a comment for historical sake, Scott. You'll remember that myself and my team at the college spent, it was a day-long effort helping to clean out that facility, kind of like germinating some of the future work, pardon the pun, but, so I'm very glad to see what this looks like. No, we didn't. Yeah. We were tearing out some of the hardwood flooring in the second.
It is amazing what you've done, Noel, in your team, year after year after year.
Well, and this isn't even
Saying
showing,
it.
this is not showing your art piece that'll be in front of it, correct?
Right, that's what I was wondering. I was like, where's the art piece?
I know, where's that?
Both passed unanimously, excellent. Beautiful, beautiful. Number 6, consideration of possible action on a commercial facade including Beach Meat LLC for enhancements to DD 840 South Broadway, tax parcel 2-118. All right.
All right, we have another one. This is from Richard Craniums. They're on the south side of Broadway, along 5th Street there at the corner. So they put forward a facade grant application to improve their building. That's what it looks like today. And then this is what they'll be proposing. So they've got new windows, stone veneer there along the bottom, new lighting, signage. It's a pretty substantial improvement on what they currently have. They did really work closely with staff on this design. Initially, there was a lot more stone, and then we've asked them to resubmit, or we suggested some changes based on the proportion of stone to the siding. It's high-quality materials. So they have a total, the total amount of project cost here eligible for the grant would be closer to $40,000. Our design review team did score this one as well, and based on the amount of funding that we actually have available to us this year, we're recommending $20,769 go to this project. The applicant was not able to be here today, but Don Meldy, the property owner, did request that I just find this out. Did send you all his letter. He is asking for full funding, or as much as possible. He thinks it's a stronger project that deserves more than the staff recommendation. So I'll let you just take a look at that yourself so you can see what he's requesting word for word rather than me paraphrasing. And it was a project that scored really well. We liked the application. Like I said, he worked closely with staff on this. But ultimately, we felt like $20,769 was a fair grant amount, considering we only have $50,000 per year to award. And so we'd love to see those funds be spread throughout the community as much as we can, while still being substantial enough to influence some pretty solid projects.
And I definitely don't get the impression that if you didn't get the full funding, they would not going to do it.
No, he's still planning on moving forward.
Yeah. Right. Okay, questions, comments?
I make a motion that we go with the recommendation.
Of the $20,769?
Mhm.
Okay. And Debbie, second, motion by Kathy, second by Debbie. Any other questions or comments?
No, I mean, I appreciate that, he's one of the only property owners to do any improvements in that area in 10 years, but we do have to be able to have money available to spread throughout the community throughout the year, so.
We shall vote.
Passed unanimously.
Excellent. Nice job. Thank you. Keep up your great work.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Number 7, consideration of possible action on the acquisition of 1489 East Main Street, tax parcel 17-940, using community development block grant funds.
All right. So we had a property come available at 1489 East Mason Street, right on the west bank of the East River, right at the entrance of Meyer Park. It's a one-bedroom, one-bath, been used as a rental. Currently sits within the floodplain of the East River. We were able to negotiate a sale with the owner. The property is vacant right now. We're able to negotiate price below the assessed value for the property, and the Parks Department has agreed to add the property to Meyer Park as an expansion for the trailhead there upon acquisition and then demolition of this property. Staff is recommending the acquisition of this property for $48,800 using community development block grant.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion by Jim and a second by, I'm sorry. Alderdorf.
Okay.
Questions or comments? If not, we shall vote.
Passed unanimously.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Number 8, consideration of possible action acquisition of 840 13th Avenue, tax parcel 2-552, using community development block grant funds. Yeah, here's you.
That's me again, yes. Another opportunity here at 840 13th Avenue, using community development block grant. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house on a crawl space. I got the opportunity to go through the property with our realtor, real rough condition. It's been used as a rental, hasn't had much improvement probably since it was built. The goal for staff here would be, once we acquire the property, demolish it and then offer it to one of our nonprofit developers, either Habitat or NeighborWorks, to build a new single-family home on the property. We also currently are working with a builder. We have a 3-year contract to build 1 to 2 new homes per year. So we would have the opportunity to build a new home here as well if neither of the other developers, had that opportunity available right now.
My son just bought a house 3 down from that house.
Oh, yeah, it's a nice
I know
neighborhood over
exactly.
there.
It's a big lot, I mean, a good sized lot.
Yeah, nice corner, visible lot, so I think it'll really improve the neighborhood to take this one out and kind of start fresh with some new housing. So staff is recommending the acquisition of this property at 840 13th Avenue for $49,900 with community development block grant.
And we negotiated already?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, and that is below assessed value.
Oh, it is below.
Yeah.
Excellent.
To approve. Second.
Motion Overgard and second by Kathy. Any other questions or comments? If not, we shall vote.
Good at this.
We are. These are pretty easy.
Yeah, compared to the big one.
Passed unanimously.
Excellent, thanks, Ken. Number 9, consideration of possible action on the acquisition of 1227 and 1231 South Greenwood Avenue, tax parcels 1-606 and 1-607, using neighborhood enhancement funds.
All right. 2 more properties for us to acquire. These are actually being sold together as one deal. but it will give us 2 buildable lots. The house that is currently on the property is another 2-bedroom, 1-bath, built on a slab. A lot of issues with mold in this house. The heating unit itself is actually in like a little shed off the back of the property, so efficiency, it's not something that is really rehabable here, but it's been used as a rental, and it's cash flowed as a rental. So just another opportunity here for us to take out, a subpar house here, and it will give us two lots to build on. We'll offer both these properties as part of the New Homes in Your Neighborhood program, which is the program for single-family homes where we offer the lot and up to $25,000 to build new single-family housing. So opportunity to take out one here and add 2 more back onto the tax rolls. So staff is recommending approval of the property for $49,900 with neighborhood enhancement funds.
And the assessed value right now is 92,000, is that right? Am I looking somewhere?
That is the assessed value, yeah. That is on, because of the land value, because it's 2 parcels.
Okay.
And then there's also, there's the house and then a garage that adds some value for the actual improvement value.
I got you.
So, but, we're hoping we can probably triple that with 2 new properties.
Right.
Or 2 new homes on these properties.
Right, nice lots.
Move to approve.
Motion by Jim to approve. Second by Deb. Any other questions or comments? If not, we shall vote.
It's a part of the shipyard. That's how they were just on the other side. It's with
Passed unanimously.
Excellent. Thanks again, Ken. Good job.
Thank you.
Number 10, consideration of possible action on the development agreement with Ken Lubinsky for the property located at 520 Hubbard Street, tax parcel 4-96, under the New Homes in Your Neighborhood program.
This falls under the dedicated staff.
Yes.
So this parcel we purchased from on Broadway for $9,000. You may recall we're working in this area. This was a property we purchased and sold and was totally remodeled for single family occupancy 159, and then we also own this one in the corner here that we're looking to redevelop as well. So it's a buildable lot, and for the record, I need to say that both Ken and I separately conferred with the law department and said, is this okay for Ken to participate in this program? And the answer was yes, as long as he does nothing with regards to this project proposal, which he has not up to this point. So the real estate team has reviewed the project and the design. Krista, do you have? That will be the proposed design he plans on building. We all met, we liked the design, we had him tweak a little bit on the side to give it more, because this will not face Maple. It will face Chestnut.
Hubbard.
Hubbard, it will face Hubbard, the smaller street. So the side, because the other house next to it faces Hubbard as well. And so Ken is looking for $25,000 grant, as well as the property. It's going to be, the bill is going to be $180,000 to $190,000, so that's the gap difference. And the real estate team recommends that we approve this.
I got that question for council. What do we have to make sure we do, or to make sure there's arm's length from staff versus our decision? Is there anything that we can be very conscious that we make sure, as this evolves, that we're doing it the right way?
So the concern arises whenever it's a person who's directly involved in their own proceedings. So in this case, it would be Mr. Rubinsky, had he had any participation in it, that's where the concern arises.
Right.
The expectation is that everybody else is going to do what's right under their fiduciary duties to the city.
Okay.
And so as long as you guys are acting within your normal fiduciary duties,
yes,
then there is no issue in that respect.
Okay, thank you.
And Ken, I just want to say Ken was not involved in the meetings, or we made him, he was out, so.
We move to approve. Alderman Arp.
And I'll second that.
Second by Kathy. Yep, question please.
So reading through the detail on the planning option, I note that it says single-family homes. Does that need to be corrected?
It's a single family. Yep, it will be a single family.
All right.
And he will occupied.
Okay.
Any problem neighbors?
Just the one.
Yeah, there's one, yeah, but.
Don't worry, I
We'll
just
see what
talked to
we
Scott
can-
about them out in the hallway.
Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. We shall vote.
Passed unanimously.
Excellent. Wow, covered a lot of ground here, thank you.
Yeah, we did.
Read that, I thought. Six color.
Any questions with the financial report or check?
That's okay, we were wondering what was going on with that.
That's what I was going
Director's report, you've been busy, Jeff, to say the least. Your whole team has been extremely busy.
Yeah.
But a lot of good stuff, a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, been really rolling on some things. Here's not over yet, so we'll get some more things done. Quick side, somebody in the room has a birthday today.
Eat some cake.
Should we say just ordered extra chocolate chips?
Right, there are cookies like you wouldn't believe, so, yes. So, happy birthday to Mr. Mayor. Just update tip changes that came through this summer, right, our long list of tax increment things, trying to clean up some things, work on getting the affordable housing resolutions, those all passed. And I apologize already to Alder Johnson. He has a communication and that'll come here next month. I totally goofed on that. But really to work on a policy about how we should administer those funds. Really to start working on figuring out, all right, if we're going to get this money starting to come in, how should those funds be directed? And kind of like our block grant program, our neighborhood enhancement program, put together a policy that council will approve to say, all right, here's how we're going to allocate those funds. So all the rest of the changes that were requested, the creations were approved by council and then approved by the Joint Review Board, with the exception of they held an extension for TID 14, that's the rail yard. They have requested extending it 3 additional years. They're like, well, we don't know quite now if we need it, so they held it. And I think it's one of those things that if they don't need the extension, if the cash flows come that time, then they won't do it, or if they need it, they want to just push that down. So, look, I like to make decisions now, but it's not the worst. That decision doesn't have to be made until 2033. So they just held it to put on the back burner for now. Pulling plants, Hugh Rice.
Yes.
Internally, we're continuing to work cooperatively with the county and the port and the stakeholders on getting together a land use plan, for how potentially we could use the site. There's still some legislation moving through to help us try and get some funding, hopefully to move forward with the study.
Right.
Still work to do, but everything has been cooperative, again, kind of thus far in terms of moving those pieces forward.
Several years went down to Madison, I think Brian Johnson, did Alder Johnson, mayor, I know all went down to Madison, how'd that go?
It went well, passed out of committee, but more importantly, the Joint Finance Committee did authorize it, or recommended passage of the bill, and so it goes in front of the State Assembly, I believe, on the 10th, and is slated to go before the Senate on the 5th, November 5th.
Fast action, fast track.
It was, maybe one point of information, it was, a request was reduced from 1.5 million to 1.2 million because that's what was available in the segregated fund within the Harbor Assistance Fund. So that's, if Marinette Marine, doesn't use all of the funding that was allocated to them and decides to give some back, it's possible more would become available and we could go for a second request.
I think even 1.2, we could live it right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting, we didn't have that conversation on the Miller development. That's the view right across the water.
Yep, and so we've talked
Absolutely.
about that, and I think that's one of the things, he's obviously keeping a close eye on in terms of phasing this out.
Yes.
What's the
Well, and
future
it
of
is
those?
2 phases.
Right, how he comes back and maybe, looks at not only design, but also like his market we'd be approaching for that. Obviously, right, those co-piles disappear.
Absolutely.
That property becomes a lot more valuable.
I think he's definitely banking on those piles.
Yeah,
That's great.
it's no secret, it's the long-term vision of the city to move those, and we're working with that window we have right now to get it done.
Great.
And then the last piece, just a little more policy. We're going to be working on our community development block grant strategy, the 5-year consolidated plan. It's up right now for discussion and then putting it together. We had one public hearing, and we're going to have another one.
I haven't set it up yet.
Okay, but we have another public hearing. This is really to set kind of the higher level strategy for how we do our individual yearly block grant plans. Part of what we're doing is also using some resources to conduct a housing study. Right, there's some things that have been done in terms of countywide, but we're really focusing on what needs to be done within the city. And in particular, the city itself, but also just some context of what's going on in the region, both in terms of supply for affordable units and market rate units, to really kind of help shape our conversation and what we can do in terms of filling that gap.
Right.
So I think it's a really good time to do it, lining up with our comprehensive plan overall for the city. So we'll be working on that over the next few months with the goal of getting it done probably early next year.
So when we say we're 1,700 units short, roughly 5,000 people are not finding a place to live where they want in the county.
Yeah, so just a little debris from Madison, the way they talked about is historically, the market produces a certain number of housing units, kind of based on population growth and economy. And then it looked at, even, before it kind of like spiked, right before the recession in 08, the number of units that was being put out was pretty substantial, and we're not anywhere close to putting back that number. But the problem is, we're not even close to putting back the number that's keeping up with our population growth. Even though it's slow, there's population growth, but then they also account for obsolescence. And basically, there's old buildings that basically don't become functional housing units anymore. And they had a really conservative estimate of something like, what was her number? I mean, basically saying a building would last 300 years before it went obsolete. Which, knowing most of them maybe could last 100, but really, for a lot, functional obsolescence probably comes after 50 to 70 years.
Sure.
And that wasn't even counting for that. So we're probably more than 1,700 units in the county. But it's just for a variety of factors of, the cost of construction, which can get maybe tied back to labor, some policies, which we're trying to address, some things like minimum parking requirements or zoning requirements, but then also funding to help make up kind of that construction gap. And then we talked about how important those low-income tax credits are in terms of fulfilling that gap between, it's not any cheaper to build a, unit for somebody, an LMI individual, than it is a market rate, and there's a gap between now the rent and the income that you're able to generate.
So just doing the math, population-wise, we're about 40% of the county.
Yeah.
So we're talking 700 units for Green Bay.
Yep. Yeah, I would say easily 700 units, probably closer to 1,000.
Well, and a lot of folks are aging in place too.
Yeah.
They're not moving.
Yeah.
Like when you're 60, 70 years old, you're not selling your house and moving into the condo or the apartment. So that market, you're not moving houses in neighborhoods then, which is a problem as well.
Yeah. And it's a big,
There's no movement
Right.
in housing stock.
And that's the
like
biggest
there normally
issue is for those moderate to lower income priced housing units, that's where the squeeze is. The luxury market, the high-end market, the prices really haven't changed a ton. And basically it's, you're having to look at a, I guess I call it inferior housing product, and you're basically pushing things down, and that's where we're having this affordable.
Where I see the impact is in 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath ranch homes for seniors. That's a popular, type of property to buy. So you're all on one floor. When they come on the market, they are gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll be working on that. I know the mayor's been working also just some larger housing policy objectives, so that'll be work focus in the next few months.
Great work. All Johnson.
Kevin, going back to the joint review board withheld the closure of TID 14. Does that affect the estimated amount of money we are anticipating to create for the affordable housing?
It does. So they basically held extending it. So it will close right now at its mandatory termination date of like 2033. We are obligated per our agreement with TWG to provide funding for 3 additional years. The project hasn't been completed yet, hasn't been assessed yet, so we don't know exactly how much increment would be. Roughly, it would mean that we'd probably have to put about $150,000 in escrow if it ended at that time to continue 3 years obligation. If we kept it open, it would just hit taxes, rebate them. If it doesn't, we could use cash balance in there projected to put in escrow to help pay that out. I think that's one of the things they looked at is we don't know what we don't know yet. And so, right, all those taxing jurisdictions want to get that revenue back on the levy, and for them it was a little too early to make that call whether or not we should extend it.
So do you know what the financial impact will be on the affordable housing component?
So that's kind of where it's going. None in terms of our obligation is to be determined. If those 3 extra years, the city's obligation is around like under $50,000. Okay. So we would have to take that out of the TID fund balance to pay 3 additional years past that.
Okay, got it.
Okay, and I know, Ken, you got a handout, and we're not gonna spend a lot of time on it today, but 3 things that I want us to always look at the big picture. One is what our kids are doing, and great reports on that, so I think we're up to snuff on that. The other thing was, where are all of our properties, and how can we get them off of, not on tax rolls and get them on the tax rolls? So I asked Ken to just give us some information on that. I don't know, we're gonna spend a lot of time, we've been at this for a couple hours now. But at least you can get the handout. And thirdly is from Deanna to next month or so, give us a report on where we are with bonding. Where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going. So we have all these 3 pieces of information whenever we're talking about a project. So Ken, I'll get a little bit of information on this, and then we'll probably adjourn.
Yeah, so the top sheet here is basically our activity 2019, our acquisitions, dispositions for the year. I included some on here for future acquisitions. Those were going for approval today, so that all got approved. Future dispositions, we have some planning options in the works. The next 2 pages on this report, basically it's our active RDA properties. So you can see we have 71 properties that we're somehow either marketing or working with someone to redevelop these sites.
So these are, we're gonna do right now?
Yeah, these are, right.
Some
so-
level, well.
In some way or another, right?
That's okay, that's okay.
Some of them
are parking lots, though?
Yeah, some of them are parking
This is not all
lots.
like the buildable lots for us to sell.
This one, well, so where it's, I guess, a little deceptive is like, on item, or number 4, I'm sorry, number 5, Quincy Street, Quincy Cherry, that's the Associated Bank lot. So it's one lot, but it shows up as 6 parcels on this list, right? So, and that's something that even citywide we're seeing with our whole master list, which actually I have as well for you guys here. Something we're working at the staff level of trying to consolidate some of our parcels, figure out what else we can do with these parcels. I know I brought a list to you guys in the past, and it was kind of a scatter shot of 700 properties. Well, this list is that same scatter shot, but we've been organizing them. So you can see in the group, it's tiny, yeah.
I mean.
And even printed on Ledger.
Yes. So these properties, we've been grouping and trying to figure out, if it's parks and there's 20 parcels that make up a park, it should just be one parcel. It shouldn't show up on our list as that many.
Right.
But then, as we're going through, we're finding these remnant parcels from other deals that, maybe a park got lopped off over here. What can we do with that? So you'll see there's the last column there, to be determined. We're working in our department to put recommendations together for what we can do with these. And then we're going to be working with the other departments to see, some of these they were purchased with a certain funding, so we can't do anything with them.
Sure.
Or you can only do this certain thing with them. So once we.
All of these, you don't even,
Yeah.
all these are like, just like stray little lots?
Not all of them are strays. Some of them on here are parks, you know, some of them.
Parks.
Right.
That
So
we're
some of them
currently using
are.
as parks.
Correct. Some of them are parking lots, like Pine Street ramp, I think is comprised of 4 different parcels. But it, you know, you would look at that and say, well, it's one, but it shows up in our
Sure,
list
sure.
as 4.
But why do
So-
they all say TBD?
Because we don't have the recommendations.
For any.
Basically approved yet. We do. All of these, we have kind of what we're looking at, but we want to run it through the other departments before we kind of, we're going to be working on this basically we're hoping.
For the next 100 years?
Yeah.
I mean.
2020.
Right.
Go on.
I think we need to make sure, like, some of these parcels in terms of, you know, ones that are identified as city, making sure, like, okay, Public Works doesn't need them for any
Right.
future infrastructure.
Right.
Stormwater management, or maybe future parking, or the same
Right.
thing for parks that, all right, these are slated for future expansion. And just really trying to get all
Okay.
departments saying, look, there's no other city use here, like, can we go and develop these? Or, nope, they're being held for particular things.
So more strategic
Exactly.
use of all of, okay, got it.
Yep.
Got it.
Great process. Great. Great stuff.
So it's a lot of work, as you can see there. There's over 700 copies.
But I'm
You guys
impressed with all the ones you got to work.
take a good process though.
We have a good team, and I think we have good direction now, so a lot of exciting things coming up.
Anything else, Bill?
No, I think
Actually,
just,
thank you.
it's good to get this in your
Yeah,
hands. If
absolutely.
there's, you know, future questions, and
Yep.
put them on a future agenda, but I think it's important just to kind of get this out to the RDA when we talk about, right, sometimes you get lost, like buying this or selling this in the scheme of things, of like, there's a lot of churn that we're making happen, and still a lot of, I think, uncovered assets, and we're trying to uncover others, that if there's other development opportunities, we want to put those out there, because if the property, right, we own it, it's not paying taxes, and there's no city function for it, public purpose for it, then we should be,
Yeah.
redeveloping it.
Absolutely.
Get those tax rolls. That's our
That makes
objective.
sense.
Next
Awesome.
meeting is
Thank you.
November 12th. Motion to adjourn, please. Debbie.
Second.
Second, yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. No.